Well, hello there and welcome to the living room of the dollhouse for another reading from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Eustace Elfers for March 16th, the day of realistic inspiration. And here at the top of the page is a visual representational image of the day of realistic inspiration. We have us an image of what could it be? Boom, it is a water faucet over a doily, it looks like. Or maybe it's supposed to represent a stylized water ripple. It could very well be. Now, does that speak to the day of realistic inspiration? Hey, who's to say what intentions the authors had in that respect? A lot of times these things are rather enigmatic, but not altogether all too important around these here parts of visual representational image. I just like folks to see what's on the page, all right? That said, what is important around these here parts is wishing you a happy birthday. So if you take nothing else from this, hey, I just want to wish you a happy birthday. That said, oftentimes folks like to join us randomly or more ideally to celebrate the birthday, and if that's why you're here, I just want to say hello, welcome, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Now, before I dive in with the redirect, something I like to do around these here parts, and that is roll some dice. All right, it is the DykASSt birthday broadcast, so I like to live up to the namesake, but I do so more importantly for synchronicity's sake. And here I rolled us a 4 and a 3 for a 7. All right, now what is synchronicity, you're probably wondering? Well, my friends, as I hear it told, the universe or the higher powers that be oftentimes will put things in our path to help us realize our goals or manifest our aspirations. But if we got the blinders up to what's going on around us, a lot of times we're going to miss such things. All right, so this is a little bit of a exercise to help us get the blinders off and start recognizing the things the universe putting down in front of us. Now, how do we do that? Well, we need some kind of sign that's kind of mutually agreed upon between us and the universe, something we can't help but recognize. That's right, your daily numbers there. Now, you don't have to go with the numbers that I rolled for you, the intention's there, but it's probably advisable you take your own set of dice if this is something you want to try out. So you can ascribe directional values to number sets there and time limits with which to go those directions. That said, once you've figured all that out, hey, pick a place that's near and dear to your heart to go explore, or some place maybe you haven't been before, and then head out. But like I said, get those blinders off, all right? Because you never know, the day might start to take on just a little bit of a theme here. You might not be seeing your numbers all the time. You might be seeing objects or representations of a certain object. You never know, so you got to stay eagle-eyed out there. Let's take the visual representational image there. Doilies, water faucets. Hey, you know what? You might start seeing them all over the place. Maybe some guys walking down the street with a pipe, and on the end of it, hey, what's that? It's a doily. That's right. No, not a water faucet. It's a doily. I don't know. Or, they're using it like a white flag, those protesters out there. The police are trying to subdue them. I don't know. You just got to stay eagle-eyed to see what you might see. It also could be just as simple as an advertisement on a bus bench, all right, or a mural on the side of a building. It's just something you take in stride and a little bit of an indication that the universe is lining things up for you. All right, so let's say this first directional value you set off, I don't know, due north, whatever the case may be, whatever you ascribed to it, and time limit has elapsed, and hey, you know what? You haven't seen anything. No numbers, no anything special going on, just the everyday goings on. Well, in those circumstances, just take a step back, compose yourself, look around, see what you see, and maybe you just happen to notice something small, like you're on what's this? Oh, 34th Street, all right? Or maybe 7th Avenue. I would take that as a sign you're on the right path, all right? So just bend down, roll yourself another directional value, time limit, and no sooner do you stand up, hey, maybe one of those numbers just so happens to be on the bus that pulls up. Hey, I would say take that as a sign to get on a bus and ride, all right? And maybe you just so happen to have perfect change in your pocket to do as much. And hey, you know what? Maybe on the side of that bus is, I don't know, a doily, all right, or a water faucet for a water park that's nearby. Who's to say? The theme might present is what I'm trying to get around and trying to correlate here for you. So take it as a sign to get on the bus is what I'm also trying to say. And maybe you don't like riding the bus. Hey, I hear you. So maybe as soon as you get on the bus, roll yourself a time value to find out when to get off. But hey, no sooner you roll the dice, again, let's say you roll number 7, maybe you look up and somebody's wearing a jersey that has the number 7 on it. Hey, I would take that as a sign to maybe get off the bus when they do. Or in other circumstances, maybe you do as much and notice as much, and you know what? They might serve as your white rabbit of sorts to go out and follow. And if that's something that presents, you know what? Just give them a little bit of a buffer. You don't want to spook your white rabbit. You know, that might take them off course. But if you do spook them, they notice you're stalking them ostensibly, and they confront you about it. Hey, you know what? Just be transparent. Show them your dice. Show them this video. It's my birthday. I'm trying to shake things up, see what the universe has in store for me. Those folks are apt to say, well, that's just crazy. And you're like, hey, I know, but it's this dude on the internet. I'm just trying to make things. They go, yeah, that's crazy too. But what's really crazy, it's my birthday too. And you're like, oh, yeah, that sounds a little harebrained, but you know what? Reality might be stranger than fiction sometimes, all right? So it might just happen. So in any event, I think you get the idea. Get out there, start stacking up coincidences, start stacking up synchronicities, if you like. I think they're interchangeable, and you're apt to see the kind of magic that I think you might just happen to see if you try this out, all right? So you get the idea. Let's get on with the birthday read. All right, your month is March, your day is the 16th, your sign is 24 to 26 degrees, Pisces of the Pisces III period specifically. And your quality and element is mutable water. That's right, for the water faucet there. All right, March 16th, the day of realistic inspiration. March 16 people are able to combine the imaginative and the practical, the inspirational and the down-to-earth into an appealing and realistic attitude. And indeed, those born on this day have a talent for balancing the contrasting sides of their character. And sometimes they are swayed by their fanciful side, but generally stay within the bounds of good sense. And March 16 people do best when they can follow the middle path. Their ability to compromise is in general a positive thing. And though being able to appreciate another person's point of view and to adapt to it, they stand a good chance of succeeding in the world. However, they must be careful not to betray their own personal set of values in the process, or to sell out what they believe in most. And less highly evolved individuals born on this day are quite capable of doing the latter, particularly for gain, and will suffer enormously for it in terms of guilt and regret later on in life. Many March 16 people carry the confidence of those favored in life. This derives not only from their own self-assurance and self-acceptance, but also from the blessing of an indefinable fortune which they periodically meet along the way. And this is further enhanced by their capacity to cull the best from most situations. And however, they often run the risk of overlooking danger and paying inadequate concern to negative energy and ignoring resentment in others, and all of which are quite capable of surfacing swiftly and blowing up in their face. And they must learn how to read the telltale signs of impending difficulty or disaster, and to deal with them swiftly as well as resolutely before they get out of hand. A kind of golden quality or wholeness imbues much of what March 16 people do. But though they value completeness and finality, their mutable side often leads them to quit projects before they come to fruition. Blaming themselves or being blamed by authority figures for such actions is, in general, counterproductive, and consequently those born on this day must learn to accept the changeable aspects of their nature. And at the same time, they have to recognize consistent efforts along one line of endeavor generally have a better probability of succeeding. And March 16 people should strive to find an occupation in which they can express both the inspirational and pragmatic aspects of their nature. Learning to handle money and to be shrewd in financial matters may be difficult and tiresome for some born on this day, but it is vitally important to their well-being. and setting up a place of residence, raising a family, keeping social obligations, and in general, taking on responsibilities is perhaps the most challenging and rewarding part of their life. And only when such practical matters are under control are March 16th people able to fully enjoy the sense of freedom they need to express their creative impulses. Well, all right. Particularly fascinating birthday breakdown today. I would say it was pretty hyper-focused on the theme, which in no small part has been happening since Capricorn started, but I would say they expanded really well out within those particular confines, explored a lot of the different facets that might apply to it. I only mention as much because before we got into Capricorn, most of the birthday breakdowns were pretty well rounded, if you like. They would get into, say, relationships with children, maybe with parents, as parents. I mean, the whole gamut. Not so much with that here. They really didn't even get into relationships too much, but that's why I say it was pretty hyper-focused on the theme. But here nor there, I just kind of like folks to understand kind of where the book approaches such things before we dive into a little bit of a commentary I like to provide, so we can make connotations with days previous, maybe through lines that pervade through the period, or just things I've found interesting in general. So let's dive into it, all right? March 16th, people, the day, or March 16th rather, not people, the day of realistic inspiration. I said you're able to combine the practical and the imaginative into what the reading claims is an appealing attitude. And you're said to have a talent for balancing the contrasting sides of your character. And while that may not seem all too realistically inspiring, contextually speaking, this is a very unique ability as far as the Pisces period is concerned. As an overwhelming majority of those born in this period share this same said contrasting dichotomy of certain traits, all right? The real versus the imagined, the physical versus the metaphysical, etc. But to find a balance between the two, let alone synthesize them into something more, is very often a struggle that they endure. If it might even be a losing prospect in a lot of cases, and a highly suggested aim in the bargain for them to try and approach. But right from the get, you're said to have that in your tool bag from the sounds of it, all right? And while you may be swayed by the more fanciful, as many often are, I would argue, you're said to stay in the pocket and do the best when you follow a middle way. So you Buddhists will probably like to hear that, right? But which doesn't go well for several others this period, interestingly. They have to kind of drill down on one side or the other in no small part. But like many others, you must be careful not to betray your own values and aspirations when adapting and otherwise compromising to the outside world. All right, as regret rather and guilt might plague you also, in such bargains. Having said that, however, you're purported to cull the best from most situations, owing to your own self-assurance and acceptance, and that's another rare attribute, which often needs cultivated by others, not just in the period, but the book writ large, all right? But you may run the risk of overlooking danger, they said, and you might also drill up some resentment from others based on your abilities to manifest fortune and success from your endeavors. In said situations, it's recommended that you learn to be able to recognize said circumstances. Which, again, that's something that often gets brought up, though not necessarily in that particular context. It's just to start recognizing certain things, warning signs, if you like, in a lot of cases. This quality of valuing finality, but often not finishing things, is quite novel, however. It doesn't pop up very often. And perhaps one of the more challenging schisms that you may personally face here, all things being considered. Let's say almost, if not every day this period, possesses some kind of similar at odds dynamic. And so, being clever and practical with finances, they said shrewd, and I always have to look that one up. It's being clever with practical matters. It's also something I don't recall presenting this period. It focus on finances too much. So maybe take note of that. You might have to get a little more clever than you'd like to with the finances. But I do find it interesting, and it might make sense to you if setting up security and roots and taking on responsibility is what's said to help you flourish on into life. I suppose going into the read, such things are probably already presupposed to some extent. But I'm glad they pointed it out regardless, because it's not something that always gets brought up. All right, so pretty interesting they came to that particular conclusion for you. That said, that's what I had to say about your birthday breakdown. Hopefully you took something of value from it. I know a lot of it was reiteration, but sometimes we got to hear things over and over again to cotton to some kind of realization of as much or find some value in it. In any event, let's move on to your numbers and your planets. All right, a little astrology and numerology if you like. All right, those born on the 16th of the month are ruled by the number 7, as 1 plus 6 equals 7, and by the watery planet Neptune. People ruled by the number 7 can get out of touch with reality easily. Particularly true for those March 16 people who neglect the practical concerns of life. And Neptune is the planet of dreams, fantasies, and also of religious feeling. And its influence on March 16 people, whose sign Pisces is also ruled by the planet Neptune, is indeed strong. All right. Not a whole lot said here. The dual rulerships, they tend to just kind of emphasize certain points and talk about how that other co-rule, or the dual rulership rather, just kind of bolsters those respective powers. That said, let's see if I can add a little bit more value to it for you. Give you a little bit more information on such things and maybe wax a little bit philosophic with some of it. Who's to say? I can't recall what I wrote. All right, the number 7 and the planet Neptune for a dual Neptune rulership day, and quite the anomaly for a Neptune rule day, let alone a dual rulership, considering Neptune is, like they said, considered the planet that rules dreams and illusions. And really, it tends to propagate a more head in the clouds kind of mentality for a lot of folks, because they're focused on ideals, higher causes, romanticism. They also mentioned religious feelings, and that's over-grounded concerns, to say otherwise, practical matters. All right, those such things, they aren't really on a Neptune individual's radar. So to have a mind for such practical matters, as they said you kind of do in the breakdown there, to kind of juxtapose with your ethereal concerns, it's surprising that this came up, as there's plenty of other people with a earthly planet in the mix who don't have practical concerns. So it's interesting they're in the mix for you, even though you got this co-rulership, or this dual Neptune rulership. That said, mention of keeping the practical concerns close does come up, but there's also a baked-in element of having a certain kind of magnetism for Neptune folks that's said to be able to dissolve absolute and rigid natures. That's kind of baked into the bargain there. So it's interesting that this arousing negative energy in others is also mentioned in the breakdown. So it must attract jealousy as well, all right? Interestingly. But besides that, Neptune, it tends to lend to a pursuit for higher causes, as I said. Either individually focused on yourself, if you like, or more outwardly toward, helping others, if you like. For you, based on the breakdown, also the past week in this period, I would say it's much more individually focused for you. No judgment therein. I just wanted to impart a little bit more of the dynamics that are going on there, so you can kind of know what qualities you share with the other people who share your birthday period there. Because it's not necessarily a selfish thing. It's just it's more focused on coming to a higher realization of yourself in those regards, and not some cause in advancing that. So, in any event, not to say that's not baked in there too. It might just kind of be more, what do you call it, scattered, if you like, not so focused as the other days are. That said, hopefully we provide a little bit more value than the book had to offer. They only have so much space to do as much, so there you go. But that said, let's move on to your tarot. That's right. One of the more eclectic of the New Age metaphysical ideologies, even though it's not that new. But hey, let's just see what it has to say. Sometimes we can make even further connotations with the breakdown. So let's dive into it, all right? And then we can leave it here in the book and move on. We're going to start dealing out the cards to predict our future down the line. So, or however they're used, right? So, in any event, the 16th card of the major arcana is the Tower, which in one version of the tarot shows both a king falling from a lightning-struck tower and the builder of the tower being killed by a blow to the head. And the tower symbolizes the impermanence of not only physical structures, but also of relationships or vocations in our lives. The changes wrought may be sudden and swift, and the positive elements of this card include overcoming catastrophe and confronting challenges. However, the Tower cautions against rising unjustifiably high and risking destruction at the hands of one's own invention and succumbing to the lure of fanciful enterprises. In March 16, people are reminded by the tarot to build solidly and to be prepared for misfortune when it arises. Well, all right. Pretty boilerplate, cut and paste copy job here, if you like, for the Tower, but they did button it to personalize it here for you a little bit. And oftentimes, I would say up until about the Aquarius period, they never mentioned the card serving as an example to live up to. It, by and large, was just something that spoke to the day in no small part. Sometimes it didn't, but most times it did. So let's see what happened for you today here with the Tower. All right, at least what I was able to pick up on. The Tower symbolizes impermanence in relationships and vocations, as they said, for positives of overcoming challenges as well as catastrophe, and a warning of rising unjustifiably high in one's position and risking self-destruction. All right, and for you specifically to prepare for when and if disaster strikes. All right, they don't often say such things specifically in the tarot there. Interestingly, this is a rare instance of a card not really speaking to the breakdown as I was perceiving it, outside of generally applied terms. Everyone facing challenges and impermanence, etc. But usually these cards almost seem to speak to the day in a lot of surprising terms, as I mentioned previously. And I'd say it's interesting in that it kind of follows suit with how anomalous a lot of the various elements of today have been coming up, specifically with Neptune not necessarily speaking to a dual rule. I keep saying co-rulership, a dual rulership, dual influence of ethereal-minded, head in the clouds type things. Like I said, I wouldn't have thought you'd have practical matters at the fore there. But with that having been said, I'd say it also lends a certain amount of credence to the idea that the book isn't trying to otherwise pad the stats, if you like, all right? Or show that such things are a irrefutable science, if you like. So I think it's kind of interesting when these things don't line up in that respect. They're not trying to force a puzzle piece into fitting, all right. And like I said, it's the 16th card of the deck, and so it always pops up on the 16th day. So to try to, sometimes these things fit in incredibly well. It's surprising because it's not this at random thing. It's always following the same pattern. For you, it just didn't really seem to line up, at least to me. That doesn't mean to you it doesn't seem to line up perfectly. So maybe it does. But that said, that was my take on it. Hopefully you took some kind of value from it, or at least drew something interesting to consider. So that said, at least not risking destruction at your own hands, right? I would take that to the bank for sure. That said, that's been your tarot. Let's move on to your health. All right, here we go. Your health. Those born on March 16th should pay a bit more attention to their health. All right? Making matters of diet and exercise part of the whole package of personal responsibility. Regular checkups, both dental and medical, are strongly recommended, as well as auxiliary reading to support their knowledge of health in general. And March 16 people may have to develop objectivity in regard to their diet and spend more time in choosing foods which are suitable for their needs. Quite vigorous exercise, including one-on-one competitive sports like tennis, is recommended for March 16 people, and all outdoor activities from camping to surfing, hang gliding to rock climbing, bicycling to motorcycling are also all possibilities. All right. All things being equal, this was a pretty unique health entry, even though in some cases they didn't say a lot. That said, I'm probably burning down everything I have to say. Let's get back into the notes here. They recommended to pay attention and take personal responsibility of your health. All right. Pretty unique entry here. In this particular period, it's been all over the place. Nothing, no particular through line specifically. Some days they care about their health, other days they don't. Other days they're just naive to as much. And, for you, they said you need to pick up some personal responsibility for it. So it's a novel inclusion in that respect. Maybe the first time it's come up too, who's to say? And when they say personal responsibility, it makes me think of a Saturn rule day, because that's just baked in for them. So that doesn't mean anything to you, I'm sure, but that's just where my mind went. And this extends to the reading so as to help you try to okay, I'm sorry. That idea that it's novel also extends to the idea that you support your health knowledge. All right, it's a surprising first, I would say. Trying to find some books so you can learn up. All right, considering that would be a key recommendation for anybody, I would argue. So surprising they gave it to you. But maybe realism drops away for you in such respects. Who's to say? The practical approach to life for you, when it comes to health, it's not there. Who's to say? It might be why they're writing about it. I don't know. But what else do you have to say here? The reading just wants you, by and large, I say the reading just wants to keep your best interests at heart. So that's probably why they're recommended as much. So maybe take note. Maybe you just need to bone up a little bit. So with that said, vigorous and competitive sports to ensure you stay grounded, I would argue, are mentioned with some heights-based recommendations, the mountain climbing and such. The other day was the day of the heights. What day was it? It was yesterday, March 15th. They had a through-line theme of focusing on the heights. So it's interesting that this kind of came up for you so close to the previous day. They mentioned some things to, get up there, to get your head in the clouds, literally, if you like. And what's interesting about that is a lot of times when there's a huge Neptune influence, they want you to be more grounded. Go out on a walk. Go walk through nature. Get your head out of the clouds. But I would say in no small part it still endorses it a little bit. Here we had a literal height theme, so I just thought it'd be interesting to bring it up and dovetail it into yesterday, since it was so close in proximity. What else did they have to say? They didn't really recommend any specific foods for you. A little bit of anomaly, not too much though. Back to Capricorn again. They kind of started avoiding mentioning specific foods that are good for you for your diet. And normally for the book, they like to do that. And they just started bringing up cooking and how folks have an appreciation for cooking. Again, from Capricorn on to now. I know it didn't get mentioned for you, but it's been coming up a lot this period also. But there is one thing you should probably try to stay away from, and that's dairy, because one of the body areas for the Pisces individual is the lymphatic system, and it's said to not do well with mucus, and you want to keep things free flowing there. So maybe mind you the dairy. But to say practical concerns for diet, pretty novel, all right? So you got to be objective there. They don't ever really say that. So it might sound like a cop-out to some extent, like some lazy writing, but if it's just for you, I would say that's not the case at all. And I don't think they've mentioned it even one time, if at all. Maybe they have, but there's been 300 and some odd other birthdays I've read, so I'm bound to forget a couple things. That said, that's been your health. Hopefully, again, you took something of interest from it. Before we move on to some advice. That's right. I know we've heard a lot of advice already, but let's dive into some more, all right? Sometimes we'll get a little redundant. Just help us hear things that 47th time before we cotton to it. All right, here we go. Constantly reaffirm your belief in life, all right? And beware of a tendency toward negativity, and search for new horizons and avoid complacency. And push yourself to express the very best which is in you. All right. Quick, fast, down and dirty, I would say. Sometimes they might throw in another sentence, but when they take that sentence out, it definitely feels concise. All right, any of them. what I have to say about what they had to say. They said constantly affirm your belief in life. And here's the thing, I have a hard time reconciling this for you, because outside of those who compromise themselves and their aspirations to fully assimilate with their circumstances, as they kind of mentioned in the breakdown, I saw you as a rather prosperous individual, at least in your capacity, maybe even ignorantly so in some cases. So, but yeah, don't fall victim to the assimilation, I would say. I got the idea that you had a belief in life, is kind of what I'm trying to say. So maybe they're just trying to further endorse that you keep it up, perhaps. They also said beware of negativity. All right, again, I didn't pick that one up for you outside of previously mentioned dynamic there to avoid assimilating to things you don't believe in. That could be rather negative, even though it might be positive for someone else. But they have been known to be redundant with such things, to further endorse, to keep you on that path, I would say. And it's important that you maintain that golden wholeness that they said, or the golden wholeness there. WHOLE, wholeness, all right? They said search for new horizons and don't get complacent. Complacency's been a bit of a through theme here for the past few days. All right, people start to get passive. They start to rest on their laurels, maybe. They stop using their intuition, if you like, sometimes. So I would say, just from a period standpoint, it's running a little bit of a through line. So avoid it like the plague if you can. All right. And I'd say it's huge advice for anyone, but Neptune days have a tendency to get lost in illusion, and perhaps another recommendation to just start staying practical and make sure you keep it in your life, all right? And stay grounded if you can. They said push to express the best in yourself, and I'd say always be advancing, all right? Fight off that complacency. Keep your confidence and your self-assuredness and good standing in the bargain. All right, and I would say it can atrophy like an underused muscle too. And today is a day of maintaining, if ever there was one, I would say. Even if balance is in your nature, and it's a baked-in element of who you are, I would say just keep trying to maintain it. All right, because things can get out of whack quick, fast, and in a hurry. And once they do, it can be hard to get them back to an even keel, I would say. But having said that, that's what I'd say about your advice. So let's move on to your meditation. That's right. It's your birthday. You get something to think about. All right, here we go. Success can often be measured more truthfully by internal rather than external criteria. All right. A little bit of a mouthful as far as the meditations go. Let's say one more time here for you. And I stymied myself in there trying to fight off a cough, so bear with me here. Success can often be measured more truthfully by internal rather than external criteria. All right. There's your meditation. You know, I'm not going to try to throw my spin or interpretation on as much. It's your birthday. It's just for you. It'd kind of defeat the purpose if I did. That being said, I don't have one. Sometimes I do right off the bat. This time I don't. So, but any event, that's just for you. So that said, that's your meditation in a can, if you like. Let's move on to your strengths and your weaknesses. That's right. Let's hold up that practical, objective mirror, if you like, and see where you got the girth and where you otherwise maybe a little more muscle atrophy, like we mentioned there. That's right. Your strengths, you're imaginative, you're practical, and you're active. Hey, you know what? We knew all those, and those are some pretty strong strengths, I would say. But your weaknesses, let's hold that objective mirror back up and flip it to the side that blows up your face. That's right. It shows off the things you may be otherwise a little more superficially insecure about within the metaphor. That's right. Your weaknesses. Okay, what do we got? You're fanciful, you're jaded, and you're neglectful. Ooh, neglectful. That's a tough one to try and reconcile there, I would say. And oftentimes I like to say our strengths are going to help us overcome our weaknesses, if there's something that even need improved upon. But I also like to say our weaknesses can also be strengths. It just depends on the situation. There was a day a couple months back now where impulsive was a strength, and then the very next day it traded to a weakness. Like, where's the disconnect? By a couple hours there, that's going to change it? And it just depends on the individual, the circumstance, like I said. So how can our strengths be used to improve upon our weaknesses? Well, you're imaginative. I say you're going to cook up some interesting novel approach to figuring out a solution on how to improve upon your weaknesses. You're practical, and like, you know what, we're showing that balance again. You're going to have a practical means of approaching implementing those imaginative ideas. All right, you're also active, and so I would say you're going to fight off complacency, and you're going to get after improving upon yourself. No haste and no waste. Right, that said, what's the case to be made for your weaknesses being strengths? All right, fanciful would be defined as overly imaginative. So it's interesting that imaginative is also a weakness. All right, it's just too head in the clouds apparently. All right, and maybe on one of those days where practicality takes a day off. All right, that said, how is that a strength? Well, it's creative mind, right? Just like the imagination there. Unconventional ideas. Here we go. We're going to get into figuring things out in ways that other people won't. All right, and you're going to approach challenges in non-aggressive ways. Okay, and you're going to handle adversity calmly. All right, very important, very important. You take a Mars day where aggression's just baked in, they might not be so fanciful about it. They'll be a little more aggressive or antagonistic, if you like. So it can be a strength. It also said jaded. Well, how can jaded be a strength? A little tougher, I'd say. You're able to see through superficiality, though. All right, you've been seeing so much fakeness in your life. You get a little jaded. You know what? You're able to identify it. Huge strength. How many people come and try to be fake, try to shine you on? Hey, I see right through it, pal. I've dealt with your kind before. There's the strength, all right? Not a good look necessarily, but hey, it's going to pay off dividends, I would say. Also a good coping mechanism when it comes to enduring challenges. All right, it doesn't sound all that great. Sometimes we got to look at things a little more negative so that we can help ourselves get over the hurdle. So it could be a strength in those regards. Just don't let it get out of hand. Maintain some moderation and some balance. Moderation being another one of the watchword themes for the book writ large. Also said you're neglectful. This is a little bit harder one to try to reconcile here, but you embrace imperfection in a way. All right, to say that well this is good enough. All right, well that doesn't sound right. Well, you know what? Sometimes people focus too much on imperfection, and then they apply themselves to it for too long. All right, when you say it's good enough, it gets the job done. Let's move on to the next thing. All right, you're kind of neglecting having to have it be perfect. All right, so it's a strength in certain situations. It's also a strength for calculated risk. All right, you're neglecting a safety net. All right, you can't be a free solo mountain climber if you're worried about not having the restraints and stuff. All right, it's those guys that got to get into that zone where they're neglecting the safety measures so that they can climb that mountain. Once they start thinking about them, they might slip. Right, so that's a weakness in that respect. All right, what else do we have here? So also with aggressive stock trading, hey, you're neglecting the fact it's a risky venture. But you know what? It's just as you might be apt to lose. Just as you might be apt to lose, you also may apt to beget a windfall because you were neglecting the safety measures there. So again, it just depends on the situation. We got to be measured, got to be balanced, and I know that flies in the face of being neglectful, but hey, they said it's one of your weaknesses. Let's turn it into a strength if we can. That said, I also often like to argue not to get rid of your weaknesses because they're a part of who you are. All right. So that said, I think you get the idea of strengths and weaknesses. Let's move on to those born on this day. And when we get into those born on this day, something I like to do is look at it from the perspective of trying to generate some inspiration to start chasing after our passions. Not just see who shares your company, but maybe see why they got in the book and start fueling our own fires. All right, because I think it's important. We're chasing after a purpose or something we get fulfillment from. Too often I get out in the world and meet people, ask them what they do, and more importantly, if they like it. And a lot of times they don't, all right? Because I think they just got into a job right out of school, make ends meet. Yeah, maybe they start climbing the corporate ladder and they're filling the coffers. But at the very root of it, the fatal flaw, it's not something they like to do. and to figure out what we like to do, let alone a passion. Sometimes it takes time, work, and commitment. And at the end of the day, you're just rallying for the next day, and it's just a vicious cycle. And before too long, you're in the grave, and you never realized any of your dreams, right? So, hey, you know what? If they can wish anything for somebody on their birthday, it's that they start trying to find their dreams, all right? But if you've already figured those things out, well, then the hat that I'm not wearing's off to you. Let's just see who shares your company, what lottery you drew. So let's dive into it, all right? And drum up some inspiration regardless. All right, here we go. We start off with James Madison, the U.S. President and member of the Continental Congress and a co-writer of the Federalist Papers, and he helped frame the Bill of Rights. We also have Jefferson's Secretary of State. He was Jefferson's Secretary of State, rather. We also have Jerry Lewis, the comedian, film, TV, stage actor, film producer, also a director, and famous for The Bellboy, and a host and sponsor of Muscular Dystrophy Telethon. So he chased after a cause, not just himself. How about that? A balance there, if you like. We also have Bernardo Bertolucci, an Italian epic film director of 1900 and The Last Emperor. We also have Simon Ohm, O-H-M Ohm, a German physicist, and formulated the law of electrical currents. That's right, and Ohm's law was to follow. We also have Armand Sully Prudhomme, a French Nobel Prize-winning poet and a critic. We also have Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a U.S. Senator of New York. Elvira Mabel Burns, a designer of U.S. Social Security. Realistic inspiration, perhaps. We also have Matthew Flinders, a British explorer of Australia. And we also have René Dumas, a French surrealist fantasy writer and responsible for Mount Analog. We also have Isabelle Huppert, a French film actress. Alice Hoffman, a novelist of At-Risk fame. Tommy Flanagan, a jazz pianist. And we also have Nancy Wilson, a guitarist and songwriter from Heart, and a sister of Anne, one of my favorite female guitarists there. We also have Caroline Lucretia Herschel, British 18th century, 18th and 19th century rather, astronomer, and assisted her brother William and published a star catalog. Very interesting. We also have Roger Norrington, a British conductor, Leo McKern, an Australian-British film, stage, and TV actor, Krista Ludwig, a operatic concert soprano, Jean Rosenthal, or Jean perhaps, a Broadway lighting designer, also Sybil Bedford, a British writer of a legacy, and Rosa Bonheur, a French 19th century animal painter and a feminist. All right, hey, we ran the whole gamut today of different individuals and a lot of artists, some politicians, people who served higher causes, I would say, but also some serve the higher enlightenment of themselves. So you know what? Just take it as a salt to taste kind of situation. Pick your poison if you like, all right? A balance between the two, most ideally. That said, that essentially rounds out your birthday read, except to say your season is winter. Your sign, once again, is Pisces, of the Pisces III period specifically. And your quality and element is mutable water. And this has been March 16th, the day realistic inspiration from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and you Stelfers. I have an affiliate link for this book down in the description if you're interested in diving in for yourself. This thing makes an excellent coffee table book. If you're ever in the market for, I don't know, hosting a party, trying to break the ice, this thing's going to get it done and do the lion's share of the lifting if that's not something you want to do yourself, all right? Like I said, the affiliate link's down there in the description. It's right above a personal message I like to put together for the birthday boys and girls, so check that out too if you're interested. That said, book having been relayed, that's not what's important around these here parts. Like I said at the top, what's important, wishing you a happy birthday. So once again, happy birthday, all right? And for everybody else who joined us randomly or are here more ideally to celebrate, hey, you know what? I want to say thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, took something of value, even though it's not your birthday. And we see you over on your birthday reading. That said, I want to thank you for the pleasure of your time, and it was a privilege to celebrate your birthday with you. All right, so happy birthday. Maintain that golden wholeness, W-H-O-L-E wholeness, and you know what? Stay away from the dairy and be practical with your diet and study up on your health. All right, all the things. All right, find your balance. All right. So once again, happy birthday. Take care of yourselves.